Hello YouTube, and welcome to episode 5 on the video series how to deadlift over £700. So today we're going to be talking about deadlift variations. So we're going to have a look at the different types of variations and some of the ones that I used as well to help me pull £700. Okay, so we're going to start first with speed deadlift. So most of the time with speed deadlift you want to use accommodating resistance, which can be either bands or chains. Reason being is because with accommodating resistance you want to be aggressive and pull the weight as fast as possible. Now if you don't have accommodating resistance, if you're just using straight weight, you're going to have a tendency to slow down at the top. With bands and chains you don't have to worry about that, you can just pull as fast as possible. I mainly prefer to use bands. Reason being is because I just find chains, like with deadlift in particular, the chains would just get in the way and all that, and I've just got on with bands and I just feel bands are easier. But there's two different ways that you can do bands, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So chains you can use, but for the 31-week cycle of deadlifting £700, I never used chains at all. In actual fact, I think in my whole training, in the whole time I've been training, I think I've only ever deadlifted with chains probably twice. So yeah, I've always used bands. Now there's two different ways you can set it up. You can do bands across, where you have the bar and then the two bands go across the bar like that, and then you weight both sides down with a weight or kettlebell. But I mainly did front banded deadlift, which is basically where you have the bar and then the band is there's just one band in front of you, and you want the band to be about 6 or 8 feet long. Now the reason I did front banded deadlifts is because my lockout is weak. When it comes to deadlifts, I'm strong off the floor, but I'm weak at lockout, hence why I did the front banded deadlift. Now if you're weak off the floor, you might want to consider doing 2 bands across. Okay. You only need a thin band with this. You don't really need a thick band. So you want to make sure that you are aggressive and you want to pull the weight as fast as possible. So with your speed deadlift, I will use about 60%. You can go higher than that. I think I actually did 260 kilos with the band and all, but that was just a one-off, just to help me strengthen that lockout. So you for speed deadlift you want to stay about 60%, but sometimes with bands you can go high if you want to. Like I say, on the cycle that I did actually do a little mini block where I actually pulled with bands, and I just went up to a heavy weight. When I did 260, I probably felt like I could have done a little bit more, but it was hard and it was heavy. The only thing I will say as well is with the bands you want to pull fast, because there was a session where I was doing the front banded deadlifts and it was only 225 kilos, and I pulled it and I did it slowly, and the band kind of yanked me and pulled me out of position and actually pulled on my back, and it actually did hurt my back, and it did actually put my whole training block in danger actually. I was worried if I was even going to be able to finish it, but I was just so close to the 700 I didn't want to give up, so I actually continued training on through the pain, which I wouldn't advise, but luckily for me it went all right and I did recover, but you just got to be so careful with that. So moving on to the next one, stiff-legged deadlifts. I highly recommend these. If you've never done a stiff-legged deadlift before, it's just the same as a regular deadlift, but obviously your legs are a lot straighter. Plenty of videos on YouTube if you're not sure. If you've never done stiff-legged deadlift before, I recommend that you do a block of stiff-legged deadlifts, maybe an 8-week block, and bring up your stiff-legged deadlift, because I find from my own experience, if your stiff-legged deadlift goes up, so will your regular deadlift. You don't even have to really do a 1 rep max on this. You could do like an 8-week block where you just increase your 5 rep max on stiff-legged deadlift. So let's say, for example, let's say you pull 200 kilos. Right, your max on stiff-legged deadlift, you really want that to be about 170, 180. If your stiff-legged deadlift is only 120, then you can milk that. You know, if you can increase that, that's going to help bring up your deadlift. It did with me. So yeah, let's say you're this 200 kilo deadlifter, and let's say you're stiff leg, you can do 120 kilos for like 3 reps. I would just do an 8-week block, and at the end, on week 8, try and increase that 3 rep max. You know, I'll maybe do a 5 rep max. If you can do 120 for free, do an 8-week block, work on increasing that stiff-legged deadlift. And let's say at the end of the 8-week block, you can now do 160 for free. That is, you're going to find that's probably going to have a carryover, and your deadlift will go past 200. So, yeah, stiff-legged deadlifts I highly recommend if you've not done them before to do them. Now we're going to talk about block pulls. So for those of you who don't know, it's basically the same as a deadlift, but the weight is raised. So you put the weight on blocks 2 inches above the ground, 4 inches above the ground, so that the bar is higher up on your shin. It decreases the range of motion. It makes it easier in a way because you're decreasing the range of motion, so you should be able to lift more. But at the same time, it also takes out the leg drive. Okay, so block pulls will actually increase your strength off the floor as well. A lot of people think that block pulls are more for lockout, which they do help increase the lockout, but they also can increase your strength off the floor, because there are some guys that can actually deadlift more off the floor than they can on a block pull, because it just removes that leg drive. When I did the training block to deadlift 700 pound, I used lots of block pulls, and I used wagon wheel deadlift and all. Not most gyms will have them, but if you've seen my videos, you'll notice that I put 2 big wagon wheels on the end of the bar in place of weight plates instead, so it raises the bar up. So normally with a deadlift, the bar is going to be 8 or 9 inches off the floor. With these wagon wheels, the bar is now 15 inches off the floor. So you've decreased that range of motion, which means you can lift more, but at the same time it takes the leg drive out as well. So it makes it hard. It's easier in the respect of it's less range of motion, but it's harder in the respect obviously it takes out the leg drive. So with the wagon wheel deadlift, so my regular deadlift is 320 kilos, but with the wagon wheel deadlift from a 15-inch height, I did 323 kilos. So that's only 3 kilos more than my pull off the floor. Some people will be able to do a lot more weight on the wagon wheels than the deadlift. Some guys will actually find that they'll be able to do less, actually. So that's actually kind of interesting. So that's block pulls. I really like block pulls because it gives, with the weight on the blocks, it gives the same feel as the weight being on the floor. Now, rack pulls, I'm not really a fan of these. I don't do these. I've never done rack pulls for years. I did used to do them in the early days of my training, and I just found that they didn't really have any carryover. If you don't have access to blocks, if you have to do rack pulls, that's fine, but I strongly advise that you don't go above the knee. Do not put the bar above your knee, because once you do that, you're really decreasing the range of motion to the point where it becomes a completely different lift. You'll be able to lift a lot more, but it will be much, much more than you can lift off the floor. So if you pull 500 pounds in a normal deadlift, you could put the bar above your knees and you might be able to pull 600, 700, maybe even 800. But when you go to pull off the floor, it's not really going to have that carryover. I did back pulls above the knees and they didn't do shit for me. That did nothing, didn't work at all. So I do not recommend them at all. If you have to do back pulls, you probably want the weight to probably be about 10% more than you can pull off the floor. you don't want to put loads and loads of weight on, because it's just not realistic. It's weight that you're just never going to be able to pull from the floor. So if you have to do rack pulls, I would just go slightly higher than what you would do in a regular deadlift, and just use that to just work on increasing your leg drive. Okay, so snatch grip, wide grip deadlifts. Okay, little bit of a difference, and I'll tell you which one you should use and which one I don't recommend. So a lot of people will do a wide grip deadlift where the hands are just outside the rings, and they'll call that a snatch grip deadlift. But a true snatch grip deadlift is actually with your hands as far as the bar will go, right next to the plates. So you literally cannot go any further. That's a true snatch grip deadlift. So with snatch grip deadlift, my best is 250 kilos, whereas with a wide grip I've done 290, quite a bit of a difference. Okay, you will be able to do a lot more with a wide grip. So I don't really recommend doing snatch grip, to be honest. You'll get plenty of benefits. In my experience, you'll get plenty of benefits just doing wide grip deadlift. Okay, and you're going to use that for upper back. So I would do this deadlift variation for your upper back as an assistance, and do some rep work with this. Okay, so you want the hands just outside the rings. Okay, you don't need to use a snatch grip. Okay, because the low's just going to be too low. Okay, you can make plenty of progress with a wide grip. So with snatch grip, I'll just do that occasionally just to test my strength. But if I want to bring up my upper back strength, I'll just use a wide grip deadlift and just do that. Okay, so don't really worry too much about snatch grip. I recommend just a wide grip deadlift. You don't need to go ultra wide. So long as you're just above the rings, your hands are just outside the rings, that will suffice. Okay, and you can just do wide grip deadlifts for reps, and yeah, that helped me. Okay, my personal favourite trap bar deadlifts. These get a lot of bad rap. A lot of people have said that they're useless. So here's my take on it. Trap bar deadlifts are good in some ways, but not in others. So trap bar deadlift is good for the quads. It's almost a completely different movement. Now, most of you are going to find that you can lift more on the trap bar than you can on a regular bar. Reason being, I think it's got something to do with like the centre of gravity, because you're inside the weight. With a regular bar, the weight is in front of you, but with a trap bar deadlift, you're inside the weight. So the centre of gravity is completely different. Now, I love trap bar deadlifts, and for a long time I used to do them exclusively. But what I found is that if I increased, 10 years ago I used to do lots of trap bar deadlifts. I love them. I still do love them. But what you're going to find with trap bar deadlifts is I found it didn't really have that much carryover to the regular deadlift. So I would just do trap bar deadlifts just for quads, or if you're a strong man, if you've got a car deadlift and you've got side handles in a competition, then and you haven't got access to a car, then trap bar deadlifts will cure that. You know that will get you used to doing car deadlifts with side handles, so that's good. Okay, now I've got a trap bar that's got low handles and high handles. So with the low handles on the trap bar, the handles are in line with the weight. Now that's what I like to use, because I find it is slightly harder. Now with the high handles, the handles are about 4 inches higher up, so it basically decreases the range of motion about 4 inches, and I normally find that I can deadlift 20 kilos more on the high handles than I can on the low handles. I don't normally do high handles. When I do, it's more for just social media, really, just to not show off, but just I like to just test my strength and see what I can do on them. So with the low handles, my best is 330 kilos. So that's just 10 kilos more than my regular pull. And with the high handles, I've done 350. So yeah, I do. You know, I do like trap bar, but yeah, I find it doesn't really transfer to the deadlift. You know, if you get good at trap bar deadlifts, when I did it, I found it didn't really increase my regular deadlift, and if it did, it was just minimal. But I do find that the opposite is reverse. If my regular deadlift goes up, my trap bar deadlift will normally go up. But if you do want to increase your trap bar deadlift and all, I would do that as a separate block. Because when I deadlifted, right, so low handle trap bar deadlift, my best is 330. I did that a couple of years ago. At the time, my deadlift was 310. So after I did the 320, I left it a couple of weeks, and then I attempted to do 340 on the trap bar deadlift, and I failed. Now I believe the main reason for that was just fatigue, really. Now, if I'd have done that if I'd have done a deload and then done an 8-week block, I more than likely would have got 340 on the trap bar deadlift. So if you want to do a 1 rep max on the trap bar deadlift, I would do that as its own separate block. If you've maxed out on a regular deadlift, I would do 1 week deload and then just do a 6 or 8 week block and then max out the trap bar. Like I say, I like trap bar, so every now and again I will max out on that. Unfortunately, I only got 315 recently. I've failed the 330, but I'll have it. I'll be going back to it. Okay, so deficit deadlift. So a lot of people will tell you that with deficit deadlift, that's good for strength off the floor, which it is. But actually, I find it actually does help my lockout as well. So deficit deadlift is really good for leg drive and strength off the floor as well. Now, one thing I will say with deficit deadlift, I would not use a deficit any more than 1 to 2 inches, maybe 3 inches at the most. But with deficit deadlift, I normally use 2 inches, that's it. So about 10 years ago, I used to do lots of deficit deadlifts. And because back then, 10 years ago, I was experimenting with all these different deadlift variations to see which ones were good or not. But I didn't really use them to build my regular deadlift. They had their own, I would max out on and see what I could do on all the different variations, really. But with deficit deadlifts, that should just be a tool, really, to build your leg drive, build your strength off the floor. So I will be doing them for reps and as an assistance. So maybe you might do regular deadlifts to begin with, and then for assistance you might do deficit deadlifts. So when I used to do it 10 years ago, deficit deadlifts, I used to do 4, 6, 8 inch deficits, and it had no carryover at all. It didn't help. My 8 inch or 6 inch deficit deadlift would increase, but when I went back to pulling off the floor, I was still stuck at whatever weight I was stuck at, which at the time I think was about 255 kilos. So I think reason being is because with the 6 inch deficit deadlift, with 8 inch deficit deadlift, the lift is just too different from the regular deadlift, and like I found from my own personal experience the carryover just wasn't there. I would increase my deficit deadlift and it just didn't carry over to the regular deadlift. So I would just stick to 2 inches and just do rep work with it, and again use it in assistance exercise and just use it to bring up your regular deadlift. Okay, pause deadlifts. Okay, really good, especially for beginners and all, because it helps you learn that pattern and helps you get into position. Now, pause deadlifts you can do 1 or 2 ways. You can pause on the concentric, and this is what a lot of people do, this is what most people do. So you pull it off the floor and then you pause just below the knee for 1 to 3 seconds, and then you do your regular repetition. But you can also use it on the eccentric, so you would do a regular deadlift and then I will lower it down to just below the knee and then pause between 1 or 3 seconds. So you can use the pause deadlift on the eccentric and the concentric, and it helps build those positions and strengthen those positions. Right, floating deadlift, I've used this as well to good effect, and this will definitely strengthen your start position. So this is, I think these are good for people that are weak off the floor. So floating deadlift is basically like a regular deadlift, and then you basically go down and you basically stop about 1 inch from the floor, and then pull up again and then do your reps like that. Slightly different very similar but slightly different to the Romanian deadlift. With the Romanian deadlift, I would normally pause about halfway down the shin. With floating deadlift, you're almost touching the floor but not quite. With Romanian deadlift, you're probably about halfway to the shin. So very similar. I do recommend them both, and I do think they're very good for people that are weak off the floor. So I've done these both and had good results from them. Right, Jefferson deadlift and behind the back deadlift. So for those of you who don't know what it is, behind the back deadlift is where you have the bar behind you, and then it's like a regular deadlift, but the bar's basically behind your legs. And Jefferson deadlift is where you straddle the bar, one leg on one side of the bar, one leg on the other side, so the bar is in the middle of your feet, and then simply pull. I find these are both good for leg drive. I haven't really done them that much. With behind the back deadlift, I recommend wearing trousers, because when I've done it before with just shorts on, the bar just digs into my legs and it's really painful. So I haven't done these for a while. I used to do these a lot back in the day and I got quite good at them. I think my Jefferson deadlift is 300. There was a time actually where my Jefferson deadlift and behind the back deadlift, I could actually do more on them than I could on the regular deadlift. But for me, they were more just like novelty exercises really. I would just post them for social media. I haven't done them for a few years, but they are good. You know, I would probably just do them as their own separate block. You can use them as assistants, but they're exercises I like to max out on really. But I really wouldn't worry too much about them. I think all this is what you're gonna mainly want to do. So yeah, like I used to do this a lot back in the day. I didn't really have training blocks then. I would just max out on different variations. Like 10 years ago, around 2014, one because back then I did I trained similar to like Westside, so I would do 1 week I'd max out on a snatch grip deadlift, another week I'd max out on a Jefferson deadlift, another week I'd max out on a trap bar deadlift, then I'd max out behind the back deadlift, and I was just maxing out all the time, and that only got me so far because obviously back then I didn't really know as much then as I do now really. So although I was doing all these variations, I didn't know how to make them work for me, and like I say, it was more for me, it was just more just novelty really. I was just having fun with it really, and not really having a goal in mind as to how to make this all work. And then we've got axle bar deadlifts. So obviously these are a lot harder than a regular deadlift because the bar is 2 inches thick. There's no bend in an axle bar as well, so it's going to be a lot harder to pull off the floor. So I've had axle bar deadlifts in a competition before. It was about 2 years ago, and it was an axle bar deadlift. It was 280 kilos for reps. I got 3 reps. So axle bar deadlifts are a lot harder. I normally only do these if I've got them in a competition, but you can do them at all. I find, you can do an 8-week block, you can do a block of axle bar deadlifts, and if you can increase your axle bar deadlift, I find it does have a carryover and it will increase your regular deadlift. So it might be a good idea to just, mainly do a block of axle bar deadlifts, and that should have some carryover because, like I say, axle bar deadlifts are a lot harder. So if you can get good at doing that variation that's harder, that will have that transfer over. Also with axle bar deadlifts, if you use straps, which I recommend, you may find your regular straps might not be long enough to get round the bar. That's what I found. So I actually had to buy extra long straps just to wrap round the bar when I had the competition, because in training I realised my regular straps wouldn't fit round the bar. So if axle bar deadlifts is something that you're going to do regularly. If you've got it for a comp, I recommend, if your regular straps won't get around the axle bar, to maybe invest in some longer straps. You can get them. I think I got mine off Amazon, if memory serves. But yeah, axle bar deadlifts I'll generally only do if I've got them in a comp. But yeah, like I say, feel free to do a block of them and see how you get on with them. See if it does transfer over to your regular deadlift. So yeah, deadlift variations. One other thing I will say, of course, like I say, if you're a beginner, I really wouldn't worry too much about this. I would just do regular deadlifts to begin with. Once you start getting good at regular deadlifts, once you feel you've got your position down, maybe start incorporating some deadlift variations that are closer to the regular deadlift, and then just learn your positions better. You don't want to start doing a deadlift that's going to be too different from the regular deadlift, because you're just going to be running before you can walk. So just ease into it slowly, just learn the variations bit by bit. But these are, like I say, there's some good variations there that can help build your deadlift. So I hope this was helpful.